All right. Welcome to a special edition of Jackass Politics. Today we're going to be meeting with the president and vice president of the College Dems. We have Sunjay and Sohali with us today. So we're just going to have a real interesting discussion, no holds barred, see where we're at. So why don't y'all introduce yourselves? Go ahead, Sohali.
My name is Sohali. I am the Vice President of the College Democrats of America. I'm a sophomore studying international and public affairs at Brown University, and I'm from Austin, Texas.
And Sunjay?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Adam and Ian, for taking the time to bring us on. As they mentioned, my name is Sunjay. I'm the current national president of the College Democrats of America, as well as a senior in UC San Diego.
Nice. And don't mind Ian over there. He's probably going to be spacing out watching his Florida game. We're recording this on Sunday when his team is playing in the SEC championship.
On this interview, guys, don't even worry about this going on in the back. Totally on this.
We might have to start pinging him over there, but hopefully he'll stick around with us for this. So we just want to have a discussion today, and I think the perfect place to start out. There was a new poll that was released today shows that Democrats are at an all-time low approval rating. That's the lowest since the 90s. I think it was at 29%. So what are your thoughts on that? Why are we so low? And what can we do to change it around?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think right now what Democrats need to do, what I've kind of been advising them to do, is act like an opposition party. We're not dealing with a general status quo party who's in power and actually wants to work with you in good faith. They don't. They're willing to use the government shutdown. They're willing to bypass, blatantly bypass constitutional constraints to push for their agenda. And for us to kind of continue to play the games by these unwritten rules, it's just not working anymore. We can't approach mid-21st century politics with a 20th century playbook. It's kind of time to modernize that and actually fight back in a way that makes us actually look like an opposition party, because we are.
Sure. What do you think, Sohali?
Yeah, I agree with everything Sunjay said. But to add on to that, I think, at the end of the day, it comes down to are we trying to act like an opposition party? How do we actually counter whatever Trump and his administration are doing? Because what they're doing is really affecting a lot of the things that people are dealing with every single day, whether it's losing your job, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the Social Security benefits. So there's just so many different things that are happening, and so much that we can do to leverage our power as the opposition party. The little power that we do have, we need to be using that correctly to put pressure on the administration. And I feel like a lot of people are seeing that that's not happening currently.
So this kind of goes back, what I'm going to talk about, so it's kind of related but a little bit different, but this goes back to the Al Green thing. And we had some Democrats vote to censure him. And their reasoning was basically that, did he violate? And yes, he did. So we're going to vote for this. What do you guys think of that? Because Adam and I discussed that on a previous episode, and I was sort of two minds on it. It's Republicans are never going to hold themselves to that standard. They're never going to do anything like that. Do we? Because that's not really an unwritten rule. It's sort of pretty well defined. Do you think that we have any leeway to sort of abandon that and not do those sort of things because they're not? Or do you think that we still need to hold ourselves to a particular standard that we've established?
Well, I think maintaining standards is important, but when the richest man in the world with his 20-year-old cronies are running around gutting the bureaucracy and violating, the basic Article 1 protections that Congress oversees the power of the purse, not an unelected billionaire, then I think it's time to take a step back and kind of think, who are we truly loyal to? Mm-hmm. Are we loyal to, these certain internal rules or our fellow members of Congress? Or are we loyal to our constituents? And I think the answer is the latter. And personally, College Democrats of America, we put out a statement standing with Al Green because he's fighting for what people want. He's fighting to ensure that we still have our Medicare and Medicaid benefits, to defend Social Security, telling Trump that he doesn't have a mandate because he doesn't. This is one of the slimmest majorities in Congress in the past century. So I think that, while rules are important, there's a time and place. And I think right now, our government and the most foundational document within our government, our Constitution, is under attack. And it's time that we start acting like it.
So yesterday, Kristen Sinema was all over Twitter trying to dunk on people that voted against, in the Senate, that wanted to essentially evoke the filibuster. However, they have not supported the filibuster and wanted to get rid of it when we were in power. How do y'all see that argument going, right? Or do y'all support the filibuster, or do you think that we should keep it in so that we do have, when we're in the minority like now, a fighting, a hold on it, right?
I think the discussion surrounding the filibuster is a much larger conversation that is a lot more deeper. But I think when it pertains to this particular instance of like what Kristen Sinema is trying to do, like the point that she's trying to make, I think is almost ludicrous, because I think in this particular context, it's not really about the filibuster itself, but it's really about what it's being used for and what the people actually want, right? There's a lot of support from people, from the public, that they don't want the CR to pass. They don't want to lose their Medicaid benefits, that they're willing to have a government shutdown if it means that they get to stop the CR from passing. And that same goes for like federal employees that are going to lose their jobs. They've also announced support for like people voting no against this. And the fact that she's still willing to say that like the filibuster is the reason, and like trying to prove a point here about like hypocrisy, I think it doesn't make really any sense, because we're an opposition party, right? And we need to do what's best for the American people. It's not about like politics anymore.
Of course. I think what's most important to note in this moment is leveraging the power that we have to defend the best interests of our constituents. And as it stands right now, Democrats, even though we are a minority party, we have over 40 votes. And it's up to us to use those, kind of as Sohali said, to fight for what's right. And specifically, that's standing against this destructive CR.
So I think where I'm at on this is that if we're going to keep the filibuster, then we actually need the freaking use it, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, if your argument, like Sinema's, is that, hey, we need it because we need to be able to defend against when they're doing bad things. Well, now they're doing those bad things, but we're not using it. So it's like, we need to be all in or all out on this. And right now we're just kind of straddling, and that's where the perceived hypocrisy comes in, right? I also think it's kind of jacked up that she's not said a damn word since she's left about anything that Trump's doing, and now this is the fight you really want to pick. Like, it's a little interesting to me that that's the fight she was willing to pick, but like, to thumb your nose at everybody else when you're out of power is just a real bad look. That's kind of where I'm at on it. What do you think, Ian?
Yeah, I agree. Well, you know my opinion on Kirsten Sinema. It's about as negative as you can get, and luckily, there's a big upgrade with Ruben Gallego there. But yeah, I mean, that's Kirsten Sinema in a nutshell. Because when she first came onto the scene, I was actually like, okay, she seems like she's pretty good. Maybe some similar viewpoints to me, but I'm of the same mindset as you, Adam. Like, I get kind of the criticism, was like, if you have it and you want to, like, you need to use it, right? Like, you can't just have that ability to sort of try to force compromise or try to keep things stabilized and stuff like that. But at the same time, like, I'm so, and I get caught up in it a little bit as well, and I think mine maybe comes from more of a good faith place, and as that I want the Democratic Party to be better. So my criticism of the Democratic Party seems to come first and foremost a lot of times. But at the same time, I'm extremely critical of Republicans, and she just isn't. Like, this is just a fucking dunk on Democrats, and I don't know. I'm frankly just sick of hearing from her. I'm done with her. I'm ready to move on.
Speaking of moving on, in the same vein, we were, I think we need to have the discussion about Chuck Schumer. He is now helping push through the vote to be able to get the continuing resolution going along. There are now calls for him to step aside and AOC to primary him. So what are y'all thoughts on Schumer? Should he stay? Should he go? What do y'all want to see happen there?
Well, listen, I love this party, and I think when you love something, I think as Ian said it, at times you should be willing to criticize it to tell it to do better. And I think right now, as leader of the largest youth coalition of young Democrats in the country, I know the importance of young people in positions of power, right? And I think right now we are seeing what happens when they're not. You're dealing with someone like Chuck Schumer who just doesn't have the same stake as someone who's in their like 30s or 40s, let alone their 20s. And he's just simply not willing to keep up the fight. And it's coming to a point where almost everyone I speak to, who are passionate Democrats, are unsure of what's going on. Even former chair Jamie Harrison was like, guys, this is the time to fight. Like, not the time to sit down and let and roll over. And I think Schumer's inability to do that kind of proves that, while he did a great service to our nation back in the Biden era, helping usher a lot of those consequential policies like the IRA, I think this is a different era. And I think for the betterment of their party, I think it would be best for someone else to take the mantle. And this isn't just my words. These are the words of college Democrats across the country, the grassroots soldiers of this Democratic Party cause. And if you, want us to be mobilized and excited about the party, we need new leadership that we can be excited about.
So, Holly, where are you at on it?
Yeah, I agree with Sunjay, but to say something a little bit different, I guess this is more than about just Schumer. To me, this is about like the Democratic Party in general. I think there's a lot of leadership that currently does not meet the moment. And I think what that requires is a new generation of Democratic Party leaders, whether it's at state parties, whether it's within the DNC, whether it's people running for office up and down the ballot. I think it's so much more than just Schumer. I think this moment really needs young people to meet the moment, to get people excited about Democratic Party politics. And people like Schumer are not people that are going to get us excited, and it's actually having the opposite effect.
So one of the things that I'm also seeing, speaking of, y'all are the largest, what'd you say, college Democratic group, right? And I talked a little bit offline with Sohali about this past week, is that TPUSA is literally, so I'm in Wake Forest, North Carolina, which is a suburb of Raleigh, right? We're 50, 60,000 people, not the biggest of towns, but they are now posting events on our community Facebook page where they're doing like spike ball for youth groups, and they want to have a pizza party afterwards and everything. I don't see any efforts like that from our side. They're kicking our ass in podcast, even though Ian and I are trying our best with, to fight that. But they're kicking our ass in podcast. They're kicking our ass in media. They're now also seeming to also be kicking our ass here on the organization of the youth, and mobilization. So how the hell are we going to take this on, and how far behind are we really in this? Is it because I don't see us doing these things? And I'm an elected official. I've asked people in my area, hey, do we have anything like this? And nobody does. So that scares the hell out of me. So do you have anything that can put my fears to ease?
Of course, and I really appreciate you bringing it up. And the short answer is I do. This is something that Sohali and I are kind of consistently fighting on the inside, kind of showing, kind of following our, crowd say somewhat crushing election loss. What we did is we got college Democrats across the country to sign on to a letter, pretty much saying like, hey, young men are shifting rightward. We lost the youth vote by in a way that's unprecedented. It's time that we do something about it, right? We're asking for things like greater financial support, because Sohali and I are complete volunteers. Things like access to the same tools like Mobilize that a lot of these campaigns and state parties have, and being able to give chapter grants and just greater connections to elected officials so we can get them on our chapters. Pretty much working to bolster the already incredible grassroots infrastructure that we have, because it exists, right? In North Carolina, for example, we do have, and in Wake Forest, for example, we do have a Wake Forest University College Democrats chapter. Our former Muslim caucus chair, Hassan, is actually the president, so they do exist. But I think it's a matter of a lack of investment, right? For Turning Point, for example, anyone across the country can go on their website, log on, and request like an activism kit to kind of kick off their events, where they just hand out, absolute propaganda, for lack of a better term, but they can get it shipped easily. And that's something that Sohali and I are working on right now. We're talking with DNC Vice Chair Artie Blanco, who's currently piloting something like this with her union, AFL-CIO. And we're very confident that once this project gets out there, along with greater funding for our chapters, we'll be able to combat that. And the thing that's really awesome is that we have larger membership than they do on these college campuses. I'd like to say that a college Republican is an oxymoron. They don't really exist. There's not many of them. Yeah. And while, college campuses are, and Charlie Kirk understands this, and that's kind of why he's waging war there. But we're kind of there at ground zero doing our best to combat that. But I think it isn't even just about college-educated students. I know it's the College Democrats of America president. That's largely my focus. But I think we got to look at non-college educated people, specifically non-college educated men. This kind of brings me to a more broader point about how I think young men are in a place of crisis and they feel like they've been left behind. And just as a Democratic Party, we need to do better to speak to them and actually give them a seat in our Big Ten coalition and actually validate the concerns that they have instead of writing them off.
Fair. All right, what do you got, Sohali?
Yeah, I think in short, we are behind. And I think it's because of this lack of investment in youth organizing, in outreach to these communities, like to young men, to people aged 18 to 29 on college campuses trying to find a job, especially like in this market economy. A lot of people are losing their jobs, and like Trump administration is certainly not helping with that. But this has also been like a long time coming. I think that Charlie Kirk's and TPUSA, like the donor base that it has, the investment that the RNC has put into it has taken place over like the last 8 years or so. And that's just something that we haven't done because we have prioritized other things instead of that. And so I think we are behind, and it is going to take us time to get there. But I think we can get there, and with the right leadership, with the right vision. And Sunjay and I are working every day to help make that happen from whatever we can do in our capacity.
So I think,
go ahead.
yeah, so I think 100% right. Like they're obviously well backed financially, resources. There's a lot of things there that give them an advantage that we don't necessarily have. But Sunjay, you talked about it. Like young men and particularly young white men are sort of in a crisis right now all across the country, and outrage culture really plays into that for them. So they have a natural gravitation toward what TPUSA and other conservative, programs or shows are putting out there. They just kind of go ahead and respond to that because they're angry, they're upset, they're in crisis, they already have the outrage. So that just we don't want to be that, right? We don't, like, Democrats don't want to respond with outrage of our own, or do we? Is there a way to make outrage like not necessarily disinformation, misinformation, or feeding upon the worst parts of the people, but do it in a way that's more productive and more constructive? And I don't know the answer to that or how easy that is, because even if we're well funded, like reaching those people in a manner that gets them to be to respond to the way that they do to TPUSA, how can we do that? How do we do that? And I don't know the answer.
I think it's important to note that, as you mentioned, the right is exploiting young men with blatant lies, kind of lying to them that, oh, if you support the big man in the seat like Donald Trump, you can be like him. We know that's not possible. We know that Donald Trump does not care about the everyday working American. If he did, he wouldn't be propping up, the richest man in the world to gut agencies like the Consumer Financial Protections Bureau. That's just, I think that's as clear as day. But to me, the best way to approach this is to understand what young men truly want. And as someone who's 20 years old, who has a lot of friends in this demographic who are both in and outside of college, what they want is to be able to be providers for their families in the future. And right now, that so-called American dream that a lot of our parents had is in jeopardy. Right. Since the 1980s, we've seen housing prices increase by 800%, and wages have only kept up by 300%. And when you're adjusting for inflation, it's practically nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm from Fremont, the Bay Area, and I go to college in La Jolla, which are some of the most expensive places in the country. And looking around, I could never afford a house here. And I think the way that we should message to young men is to not kind of try to make them outraged over a certain constituency group like the right has done, but say, hey, the right is claiming that they're going to help you, but they're not. They don't have any real plans to do so, but we do. I think Kamala Harris did a lot of good policies. I think she could have done a better job at emphasizing them. But things like, working to crack down on price gouging so you can afford groceries, or her first-time housing rebate, first-time housing buyers, to help them own a home. I think these are the policies we have to try to emphasize. And I think it kind of brings me back to 2016, where Bernie Sanders himself never had a bro problem. Young men were never against Bernie Sanders. And it wasn't because he messaged to them specifically, but it's because he tapped into that, I think, inherently masculine urge of being a provider that a lot of young men have despite these changing times.
So I need to go back and correct one thing that you did say, Sunjay. So in 1950, the Wake Forest College left my town and went to Winston-Salem. So
I got
Wake
you.
Forest University is no longer here.
That's a misleading name, doesn't it?
They kept the name, yeah.
Yeah, they kept our name, but they left in 1950. So,
Oh, got you.
excuse me, I swallowed wrong. So building on top of what you said, though, so part of the issue, and this is something that Ian and I have talked about a lot. We even talked about it with the guys on Progressive. You talk about that, the home ownership thing, right? California building practices are horrendous, right? And it's led by our party.
Yeah.
So, how do we? I mean, honestly, the 20, even Kamala's $25,000, tax credit, whatever it was. Honestly, it wasn't the best policy. I wasn't excited about it because, in real terms, right? Like $25,000, while nothing, it doesn't really help. I mean, it helps a little bit, but it's nothing to really like write home about. It's not, and it's not life changing. But also, what you would see is just the way the market would work is that people are going to mark their houses up 25%, right? Like it all comes down to supply and demand. And one of the biggest problems I have with our party is that we love to subsidize demand, right? We don't ever want to talk about the supply side, but that's where you really want to get um, that's where you're going to get the best bang for your buck, right? So one of the things I would love to see our party change is us becoming the party of abundance. And let's talk about being the party of abundance. You want to buy a house? Well, let's make it where we're going to make it where people can build houses, be safe about it. I'm not saying we got to get rid of environmental standards even, but let's make government work better to be able to make it where we can have cheaper things, right? Because the more government regulations that we put in place, and we love to be about process, right? One of the worst things I think, y'all been trying to build high speed rail in California for years, right? So it shouldn't take 30 years to build a high speed rail. That's insane. We need to be transformative now. China is just kicking our ass when it comes to high speed rail. I'm not saying we need to be as careless about the environment and people and stuff like that they are. But what I am saying is that we built the Empire State Building in like 4.5 years. We need to be able to get back to doing things like that, right?
Yeah.
So where do you see in your version of because I think a good discussion to have today would be what ideals do we want to see our party have moving forward as far as something like that? Where do our policies need to be aligned at to be able to make it where we can get the young white voters back, white male voters back, being able to have it where they can become providers, right? So where do you see our policy needs to change? And I'll start with you, Sunjay.
I think you brought up a very important point, and you're setting the Ezra Klein podcast, which I really love that. And as a native Californian, oh my God, I would love to have a high speed rail from San Diego to San
Oh,
Francisco.
man.
I could go up right now, go back home every weekend if I wanted to, but
Yeah.
I can't because it's like an 8 to 10 hours drive, depending
Yeah.
on the LA traffic. But I completely agree. I think the conventional wisdom of how to fix the affordable housing problem is, surprise, surprise, to build more homes. And I think that we are kind of bordering over vetocracy in a way where it's so difficult to push for any real substantive change because there's so many roadblocks after roadblocks after roadblocks after roadblocks. As Democrats, as you said, we care about process, and that's important. But I think one thing that Adam French said to me, he's a guy who almost defeated Boebert in 2022, and he ran for DNC vice chair, didn't do super well, but kind of represented kind of that centrist wing of the party that we kind of overlook a lot nowadays. And what he told me was, Sunjay, Democrats, Democrats, we bring the cookbook, and Republicans bring the brownies. And, the cookbook is great and all, but you can't eat it. And I think it's time that we bring our own brownies. And instead of the Republicans' brownies, which are deporting immigrants, I think our brownies should be building more homes, as you said, or just making more resources available. And actually, creating a government that works for everyday Americans. I think the reason why some people are inclined to Trump is because government hasn't been working. As you said yourself, that's a housing rebate isn't enough, and I completely agree. I think that it was one of the better policies we had, but we need to go further, 100%. And I think that that's kind of more of a statewide issue, and I'm hoping, and kind of the people that I want to see kind of being the next champions of statewide government are those who are willing to kind of take on the internal bureaucracy, and make it so that it works for us. I think the concept of Doge isn't the worst thing, but I don't want someone like the richest man in the world to oversee it because obviously he has major conflicts of interest. We went from an era where Jimmy Carter had to sell his peanut farm to Elon Musk practically being the president of the United States. And I think there's a real conversation that needs to be had about, hey, government's not working. How do we actually fix it? And no, it's not completely destroying it. It's going in there and incrementally looking at what works and what doesn't. Personally, I think the biggest area of waste is defense budget. 30% of it goes directly to solely for profits for these big five defense contractors, and they're largely a monopoly. So kind of by deregulating them and letting them run a fry and throwing as much money as they please at them, they've kind of created a very wasteful cycle within our government, and that's something we have to stand against.
So what do you feel, Sohali?
Yeah, I think we have to make government work for people. And so that means like looking at the root causes and not like putting a band-aid on a bullet hole, right? So like if we're looking at things like housing, for example, it's not just about like subsidizing like housing and making it cheaper, but it's also like just building more housing. And I think this is a common thread that we're seeing in a lot of blue states. They're bleeding people that are moving to red states. And so they're going to be losing electoral votes. I think in the next election, if Democrats win the same way that like Kamala Harris did and they win Michigan, they'd still lose because of the electoral votes that blue states are losing compared to red states. And I'm kind of a prime example of this. My family moved from California to Texas about like 6 years ago because housing was getting really expensive and cost of living was getting really expensive. And a lot of big cities like Chicago, New York City, LA, and San Francisco, like they're facing these same problems where like crime is an issue, where like cost of living is an issue, where like housing is a problem. And like it's not a coincidence that like New York City and California have some of the highest homelessness populations. It's simply because housing is so expensive and that there just is not enough housing. And so that's why people are moving to states like Florida and Texas and Arizona, where housing is a lot more abundant, where cost of living is a lot more reasonable, and people can see like having a future that is very like decent to raise a family and to like support their educational goals and professional careers. And I think that if Democrats don't crack down on these issues and really fix the root causes of these problems, then it's going to hurt them more. Because at the end of the day, like how Democrats maintain power is through people. And if you're losing people in your own states, you're going to lose electoral power. And that's what we need to figure out why.
Say more louder for the people in the back, because I've been singing this for like a minute.
Yeah.
And I know where Ian's at on it, so I'm going to kind of leave him out of that question here. But the next thing is how do we get those in power to start listening to us, right? Like, I mean, we know we need these things, right? So how is it that we get, because when we were on Progressive, one of the guys, Belay, kept saying, well, the people here don't want more housing to be built, right? So it is a people issue. And so if people don't want it, we need to be representative of the people. And I'm like, but like, that's not like, I deal with that too. I'm a town commissioner, right? And I'm not saying that we need to go, I live in the suburbs, right? I'm not saying, hey, let's go put skyscraper in my suburbs. That's not what I'm saying here, right? It's that when you have cities like LA or you have cities like Raleigh, those need to be dense. We need our urban cores to be dense. Build high, build, densely, and, have our urban core set up. We need to be better on public transportation, right? Furthermore, you brought up crime, right? This is, I think in 2020, we went about as far left as you could possibly get. You had people saying defund the police and everything, right? Where do y'all think that we should be better at on our criminal justice? Do we need to make changes, or are you happy with our policies, or would you like to see something change? You want to start, Sohali?
I think on the topic of crime, it's really complicated because I think there's different ways to like tackle it, right? I think there's different strategies we have to employ. I think law enforcement plays a large role in that, but we also need to take a look at like why crime is happening, right? Like why are these happening only in these big cities, right? Like what is causing people to do the things they're doing? And it's about root cause. I think I believe in like solving the root cause so we can crack down on crime. I don't think that the question or the solution to crime is actually incarcerating more people or like having harsher punishments. I think it's more about like figuring out like why are they committing the crimes they are and solving the root causes. Like is it like stealing? Because I know that's something that California has laws about, like about how there are a lot more lenient laws when it comes to like stealing. And I think that is something that a lot of people are upset with because it hurts small businesses. It hurts like stores that are run by like people that are just trying to make a living, and it's not fair. And I think that really comes down to like, well, people are finding it harder to survive, and that's because cost of living is high, or that like the economy is not supporting their needs, or maybe they're not able to find a job, or like higher education is becoming expensive. So I think like it's like a root cause effect, and it creates a domino effect in which it spills into other sectors or areas of problems like crime. And so I think the root cause is definitely something we should be focusing on the most when it comes to tackling issues like this.
Sunjay, what do you got?
I think Sohali brings up a good point where the root cause of a lot of the reason why people go and engage in life crimes is because they don't have the capacity to fend for themselves, and they don't have, the prospects to make a living in a lawful way. So I think there's a couple of ways to tackle it. First, kind of focus on reducing recidivism rates instead of just blindly incarcerating people, kind of making it easier for them to get a job and working directly with them and kind of showing them that, hey, you have the agency to be a law-abiding citizen who can give back to this country. And this country does value you and love you, even though you made a mistake in your past. So I think that's thing one. If anything, I would argue that's actually financially expedient because we spend a crap ton of money keeping people incarcerated, and that's bleeding taxpayer dollars left and right. By just kind of bringing these people up, we'll be able to save countless of well-earned taxpayer money. But I think it's also important to balance not just humanity for those who are incarcerated, but also humanity for law-abiding citizens. So Holly said, people should be able to own stores and not be afraid of people breaking in and stealing and getting off with a slap on the wrist. And that's kind of been a pervasive problem within California, and that's why the one proposition that passed with flying colors was the one that kind of made the threshold for this higher. And I think that's kind of the tightrope we have to walk. But also I think it's important to look beyond kind of our present avenues of law enforcement. I think that police do well at responding to crime, but when we're dealing with individuals like homelessness problems, it's good to look at mental health counseling and kind of be more diverse. So I think defund the police was a bad messaging tactic, but the ideal behind it of, hey, let's spread out our funds to different entities to handle different problems and tackle it in a more holistic way makes sense. And I think that commonly that can get convoluted in like back and forth political discourse, and it's time for us to kind of rein it back in and actually focus on what the real problem is.
Do you want to add anything here, Ian?
Yeah, so like this is so I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and this is actually a bigger deal here than I think a lot of people kind of realize. Charlotte Metro is like over 2 million people, and in particular, our violent crime rate was rising even pre-COVID, and then 2024 we saw one of the highest figures that we've had in quite some time, and not just violent crime, but petty theft and a whole bunch of other things. And Sohali and Sunjay, you're totally right. Like it's so much down to the root cause of it. Like things aren't affordable right now, so that some people feel like there is no other choice. Charlotte, Mecklenburg school systems are not as good as they could be. There's not enough investment there. We haven't given teachers the resources or anything to keep kids in school, and a lot of kids are dropping out here. And you have so many different things that feed into this one central issue. And Sunjay, you made a really great point, because defund the police is I've said it 1,000 times, it's awful messaging. It was really bad, but the root of it made sense. Obviously, there was a time we needed reform there. We needed police reform, and not just police reform, but we needed to reform the other side too. I mean, it's like what Adam talked about with housing. You've got some basically supply side here. What is supplying these criminals into your environment? And if we can invest on the front end to keep them from getting to that point, then that's where we can be successful. But there's a better way to talk about it, and there's a better way to make that case. And I feel like we just haven't really done a very good job of making that case to the public, to the greater public. you listen to Republicans, and what they say is, I mean, they blame basically, it seems like they blame all crime on immigrants. I mean, if you think about it, like if you listen to Republicans, it seems like all the issues with crime in your city can be solved by just deporting millions and millions of people. And
On top of that, you can't forget Breitbart does have a section of their website that is dedicated to black crime too.
Yeah.
Like that's literally the section. Like the racism is implied, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that's 100% right. But like in this last election in particular, they were going to solve every crime problem by just deporting people. They were going to solve it with their immigration message. And while it's abhorrent, like it just irks me to my core, that message stuck with everybody. And I think we need to find a way to have a similar message that's actually rooted in reality and not, racism and xenophobia. So it is a challenge, but we have a long way to go to sort that message out in a concise manner. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach than what y'all three have kind of said. Having been an appropriator for our police force here and everything, and looking at what is effective versus not effective, right? Because we do have they closed a homeless camp probably 3 miles up the road here. It was right up US 1, which is a major highway that comes right through my town. So some of the homeless population did get pushed up here, and we've had a little bit of an issue with it. At the end of the day, I want the public to be safe, right? And so, I think the balance that we need is to be able to have more community policing, right? So going back to doing how policing used to be, you kind of saw Kathy Hochul do this with the subways, right? Like she put more cops on the subways. It's so having, in your high, crime areas, having cops walking through the area, talking to people, seeing them, getting to know who they are. That is going to be far more effective, and it's going to go far more. We're going to get the best bang for our buck by doing programs like that than just, pure locking somebody up. Right. But, getting out there and not having them ride in cars, like literally walking the street, being on bicycles, right? Like, and I'm not saying it needs to be the whole town. I'm saying use your areas where there's going to be, incentive for crime. So your high traffic areas and stuff like that. Like if you have a downtown area or something. But also, of course, we all have our, bad parts of town, right? And that's where it's needed. Because we have over 90 police officers for my town of 50,000 people, right? People know us for having, you can't take a trip to the grocery store without riding past a cop here, right? And that's one of the reasons why our crime rate is low. So just having it where people do see your cops and they're out and they are visible is a disincentive to crime. So I think we definitely need to make sure that our law enforcement budgets are right. I'm not opposed to seeing where we have, like first responders that are not copped to mental health crises, but I also understand that, as tragic as it is, sometimes a cop is needed in those instances, if somebody has a weapon or something, right? And I having had to deal with some of those through my 5 years here, it's easy to come in and say, hey, we just need to be able to have these guys that are going to go in there. But the first time that somebody like that arrives on a scene and somebody's got a knife and they come charging at them, that's where we unfortunately need a cop, right? That's not a situation that any of us ever want to have. It's a tragic situation, but it is a reality, right? And we need to make sure that our policies are aligned with reality. Changing the subject slightly, because we did talk about it just a second ago, immigration. Ian and I have talked about a lot that it seems like our party has no idea what our policy needs to be on immigration. Obviously we're not open borders. I don't think anybody
I have ever heard has advocated for that. But where is what should our policy be? What is the best practices that we need here, and what is it that our leadership from the top down needs to be saying on immigration? You want to start off, Sanjay?
Yeah, of course. I just wanted to briefly address what you said, and I think that kind of for me, it's like a yes, but I think that if cops are given the proper training to engage in the community, then it's fine. Just because my fear is that African American individuals, they're more likely to be convicted and more likely to be wrongfully convicted, and especially with my generation that's kind of grown up to a cop hostile political climate, there's kind of a crisis of confidence. And obviously, I would love to have law enforcement that does their job, and I think most people do. I think that's a reasonable assessment. But we have to start from actually like rebuilding that and kind of reframing police officers not as kind of architects of racism and oppression, but as defenders of the community. And a lot of young people don't love that, but largely because we saw campus protests erupt across the country. We had them in my uh, school, for example, UC San Diego, and a lot of my good friends who were college Democrats were beaten and batons simply for marching and fighting for what they believed in. And I think the only way for us to have that is for us to kind of stop using, the SD, I mean, in this case, the San Diego police and in other instances, is architects of oppression against people standing for what they believe in. So I think it's a tough road ahead, but I think it also would vary in community to community. I think in your community, it's more accepted. And, I would love for, in San Diego, for us to kind of be more accepting and having a more communal environment where we feel safe. But I think it's going to take a lot more to get there than it may in, I guess, a more swingy or red state. But in regards to immigration, I think what's most important is recognizing that we are a nation of immigrants and immigrate, and it makes us stronger, right? In the sense that like my parents were able to come here because of the H-1B visa, and because of them, I'm able to, vie for a role of national prominence at the College Democrats within the College Democrats of America and go on to potentially be an elected official. But I think when it comes down to the border, I think we actually had it right with that border bill during the Biden administration, where it would have increased fentanyl blockers. It would have made it easier to shut down the border. It would have increased the amount of staff on the border. Kind of stop playing politics, kind of the bullshit populism that Trump likes to play, where he claims he'll solve it, does a bit of a perpetuates racist innuendos and then does nothing about it.
Mhm.
And they have their occasional like, ASMR deportation, which is just disgusting. And I think it comes down to being like, hey, kind of my consistent theme with the right is just being like, hey, they're here for political theater. We're here to get things done. Let's get things done. And I think that the policies in that bill were right. And I think just kind of pushing for those is the way forward.
What about you, Sohali?
Yeah, I think the border bill actually doesn't get enough credit. I think a lot of people kind of criticize it, even on the left, by saying that it was like too far and that we should not be retreating to the inhumane policies of like the first Trump administration when it was first being introduced. And I think people kind of have the wrong idea here. I don't think that it's like, I don't think that you can make any progress if you don't take any step. And like, I know following that vote, President Biden also issued an executive order, kind of similar to like what that bill would do. And it also received a lot of backlash from like the left and also the right. And I think at the end of the day, it's like you're trying to get something done here, and like you can't have it both ways. I don't think it works like that, right? I think the Republicans are kind of avoiding voting on bills like this and taking stances and doing what actually like will solve the problem, because they want to you want to use the issue of immigration to make Democrats look bad and say that like they're not doing anything about it, and this is why crime is going up in your city. When in reality, it's just really about progress. I think that's something that like President Biden actually kind of got right, and I think that he actually should have done more. And it was a little bit too late because at that point, I think Republicans had already fully capitalized on that issue. And so that's where I think Democrats kind of need to be ahead and show that, like, we're the ones making progress. We want to see this happen because, like, illegal immigration is not good for us nor the immigrants themselves because, they're also going to be hurt by it. They're not able to, like, open bank accounts or, like, buy houses or get, like, a driver's license because they're going to be living in fear. And that's not, a life that anyone wants to live, ideally. And so we need to figure out better ways to create legal pathways for people that truly do want to come and contribute to this country, but also figure out ways to keep people that will harm this country out of it. So, like, the people that are committing crimes that are undocumented, I think that, like, deporting them is a fairly reasonable argument. But I also think that, like, we need to be treating the people that do come into this country with good intentions, even if they are undocumented, with more humane policies and treat them as people because they are, at the end of the day. They're people, and we have to treat them with respect and dignity, and that's something that Trump definitely hasn't, and that's something that even Democrats, I think, need to work on.
So one of the things that I want to see changed is that, I mean, immigration is just jacked up, right? I don't really, in my lifetime, as far as I've been in the political sphere, I don't think either party has really gone after trying to really solve this solution, right? Because if we realistically, and it was talked about a little bit last year, if we get rid of all the illegal immigrants that are in our country right now and deported them all, there's going to be jobs that are being left undone. We're going to, if we enforce that these employers now have to hire, workers at least a minimum wage and stuff like that, it's going to make all our foods, more expensive, and it's going to make a lot, housing more expensive and stuff like that. Right. That's one of the realities of all of this. Right. And I don't think it gets talked about enough is that by allowing and supporting the illegal immigration, we are in a fact subsidizing a lot of our stuff off the backs of these people. I don't think that's humane, right? I don't think that that's something that we need to be doing. I want to see employers crack down on. I have yet to see one person go after an employer in either administration. And I think that's something that needs to be done if you're going to be serious about this issue. I think we do need more immigration judges, right? We need to be able to have it where when these people come in and they're asking for asylum, that we're able to get them their hearings done. One of the things that made me so upset in the past, that we just had one of the Colombian protesters that was a legal citizen here. They're now talking about deporting him because he, was leading in the protests at Columbia University. And some of the comments I've seen on it are just it really upsets me because they want to deport somebody, right, that is a legal citizen. But further on top of that, they're like, oh, well, they weren't really a full citizen just yet, so they don't have the access to our Constitution. And I think that's absolutely asinine and bullshit, right? Like, to me, anybody in our country going through our legal system needs to be able to have access to our Constitution. These are rights that are supposed to be unalienable. They're supposed to be God-given, right? And if we're going to believe in God-given rights, it's not just God-given to Americans. It's anybody that's in our country. And so they do need to be able to be given due process and stuff like that. Lastly, I think that as long as we have these other checks and we're, I'm trying to solve our whole immigration issue in the span of like a 2-minute conversation, but, I don't think that people should be able to illegally enter our country and then claim asylum. Right. And that's been something that has been happening. Go to the legal ports of entry and, do it the right way. And that's what we should want. Granted, I do understand that we could probably have a whole 30-minute discussion on what needs to change to be able to make it where they should be able to do that. But we need to have a strong border. We need to have borders for a reason. We need these people to be checked. We all want to be safe, right? So I think we need to make sure that, going back even to the Obama era, like if you go and listen to some of the things Obama was talking about, like during his '08 campaign, '07 to '08 campaign for president, and listen to some of the things he talked about on immigration, you would think that it was Trump talking sometimes. I mean, it was a little bit different, but I mean, we need to be able to get back to having our that people just don't think that we're for open borders or anything like that, right? And I think that means that we need to be able to have a full comprehensive plan. I think that'd be a great talking point for 2026 is that when we have all these people that are going to be running, let's talk about how do we reclaim being able to be strong on the border, right? And do it in the way that is humane, that people's rights are respected. So that's just kind of where I'm at on that. Anybody have any pushback?
No, I agree. Immigration to me is a relatively simple idea, even if the application is complex from there. How many do you let in? What's the process? All this stuff. But if you're here illegally, you get deported. If you're caught crossing the border, you're stopped and you're sent back. Like this is, and I, like Adam said, the 2007 2008 Obama era immigration policy is basically spot on to what I personally believe. The complicated part gets, okay, how many people do you let in? Is it an escalating number per year? Is it divvied up by particular countries? What's the checking process? All this stuff is very wonky in the weeds policy stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be discussed as a party to voters. But we need the message to me should be very simple and very clear. And I understand why immigration is complex. I don't understand why we tend to fumble on our messaging and our stance on it.
Did y'all have anything to add on that, Sunjay or Sohali?
I think just briefly, I think everything you guys are saying is spot on, and there needs to be a greater conversation. What I think does not work is rolling over regarding the Lake and Riley Act. I think that was a mistake, largely because it kind of gives a blank check for, as people within our country not to have to go through due process. And simply your neighbor can just, be like, hey, my neighbor over here, they don't have papers, they committed a crime, that puts them at risk for deportation. So I think that we need to be smart with our policies, not just kind of play the political game and treat people like political pawns in the way that the Trump administration has done. I understand why some Democrats voted for that bill because they come from purple states, likes of like Gallego and Slotskin. Yeah. But personally, I think that there's a better way to have handled that than kind of embracing this solidly written bill that kind of puts people's 14th Amendment due process rights in jeopardy.
Holly, did you have anything on that?
Yeah, I think something else to add on to that is that I think this actually, there's another problem too that I think this, the illegal immigration border crisis problem also brings up. Border communities are like overwhelmed. Like I'm from Texas, or I live in Texas now. And in border communities that are like voting for Trump, this is one of their biggest issues because they are being overwhelmed with like the crimes that are happening, or the fact that their like public education system is overburdened because there's not enough taxpayers and there's more people that are like being or using government services. And so that's also something we need to like think about. I think a lot of times people in blue states don't really think about it that way because they are paying such high taxes. And so it doesn't affect them as much. But I think in like red states or like in communities like at the border, like these communities are facing serious issues because of the border. And that's something that Democrats have largely unaddressed. And we saw that clearly this election because those same border communities in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas used to vote blue and they voted red for the first time in like 20 years. And I think that speaks volumes. I think you need to just talk to these communities too and ask them like, what is the issue here? How can we help? Why do you feel this way? Yeah. Because a lot of them are like immigrants too, like in that area. It's not like they're opposed to immigration. It's a much larger topic because I think a lot of people can agree that like immigration is kind of necessary in a country like America. We were built on immigration and we've had a long history of immigration. And like because of our like population rates are falling too, immigration is like a great way for us to like build up our workforce and like help strengthen our economy. And so it is necessary. We just need to figure out a better way to strengthen the immigration system.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't want to see American jobs being lost to outside players, right? I mean, so I think that's also where another larger conversation comes in our education system, right? Like we need to have a transformative, movement in our education system to be able to make it where if somebody wants to, be able to do some type of high tech job, that they don't have to necessarily go to college. That's not the only route to get there, right? Yeah. I think we also need to be doing a better job of not just teaching kids to be able to pass a test, but to be able to get real life skills. I think that's one of the things that we're really starting to see an impact in our community. I mean, I hire people I probably hired 5 to 7 people a year. And the difference in between people that are under 25 right now coming in and people between 25 and 30, it's astronomical. The difference between the two, and it's just, I think that our schools are just not preparing kids appropriately. And that gets into the conversation of immigration in that, we have the H-1B visas, which I think are good. I definitely am for immigration and I support immigration but I think but as you talked about, Sanjay, is that I don't want it to be replacing American jobs, and I want us to make sure that we're in the best position possible for that. So leaving on that, we're coming to the almost 1 hour mark here. And so, what would you like to leave us on? Any talking points you would like to hear for the future party? Like what is it that you want to see happen from today forward, that you see in the 26th election, Sanjay?
To me, this most simple message is ditch the consultant class and embrace your constituency groups. I saw a lot of messaging to young people that simply did not work, and I could have told you for free that, hey, this doesn't work. You don't need to pay some 50, 40-year-old consultant how to reach out to Gen Z. You can text the College Democrats of America president and VP and say, hey, does this work? Does this doesn't work? What works? Right. Work with us, and I think that to me is the simplest way to fix our campaign strategy. I think that we've kind of thought that if we just throw money at a problem, we can fix it. But that's not how it works. Karras outraised Trump practically 3-1, and we saw that didn't transpire electorally. I have friends who worked in the campaign, and kind of the name of the game was, hey, whatever you want, we can buy. Just like literally buy whatever you want, And I think that type of like money-ridden politics, I think, has proven time and time again not to win. That's why Jamie Harrison lost his Senate race. It's why Michael Bloomberg did so poorly. And I think now in this era, that's why Kamala Harris didn't defeat Donald Trump. And I think we need to look past that. Instead of throwing money at a problem, actually talking to the people who represent those constituency groups internally and working with them to figure out a core message that resonates with their constituency groups.
Yeah, I could not agree more. One of the questions I literally asked one of our House candidates that ran last year and is going to run again this year was, why is it that we spend, we knocked so many damn doors last year? Like there was, campaigns running out of doors to knock in cities, right? Like when we have all these people going out and talking to all these people, they're capturing data, right? And they're capturing, like one of the questions is on those forms. Well, what do you care about? So if we have that expansive of amount of data, why are we structuring our campaigns based around what consultants are telling us that are doing panels in, New York and wherever? Why are we not listening to what people at these doors that we're knocking on are telling us? Why do we even need those consultants? Because I can tell you, I've won 2 elections here. The last one I won by, I won with 2,700 votes, but the next closest person to me was at like 2,200 votes, right? Like, I mean, when obviously I'm listening to people, right? Like I go into our community information page that we have on Facebook, and I'm all the time reading what people are saying. I go on Nextdoor, I read things that people are saying, and and from there, then I make sure that the things I'm talking about in my campaign are reflective of those views, right? So it goes back to, let's get rid of all of these consultants. We don't fucking need them at all. Talk about what people at the doors, because we're already knocking doors now for next year. So find out what these people want us to talk about, and then let's get them policy that is, the policy that we come up with to be able to fix their problems. And that right there, if we just did that, we would be a hell of a lot more successful, and I guarantee you that our approval rating would be higher than 29%. What do you think, Sohali?
I totally agree. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the last time I was here, I talked about how the way to kind of rebuilding this party and regaining trust within people again, as Democrats, is we need to have more tough conversations. And that means we need to do more listening than talking, and like actually listen to like what people need. But then again, like, actions speak louder than words. It's not just about listening only, but it's also about like actually doing what they want us to do. And so far, I don't think that like we've really delivered right in the ways that people need us to, right? Like there is no comprehensive like climate policy. We haven't passed a Green New Deal. We haven't like made housing more affordable, and we don't have a system of healthcare that is way more affordable for like the average American. Those things just don't exist right now. And so we need to actually like deliver. That means listening more. But on another note, I think something that's really important that I would like to see highlighted in 2026 and 2028 is bringing back the discussion of campaign finance reform. I think that would fix a lot of the root problems that we're talking about. I think the problem of big money in elections is contributing to so many different things. We just talked about this today. That's the reason why a lot of people aren't able to deliver for their constituents, because really they're working for someone else and not just the American people. Mm-hmm. And people in public service, like, it's a job, right? The people that hire them are the people, and we need to do a better job of holding them accountable. And I think that's why, like, people like Bernie and AOC and, like, even politicians that aren't as popular, right? Like Pat Ryan, for example, or Delia Ramirez, like, they're just so effective and they have such high approval ratings and they get elected with such high margins because they're listening and they're working truly for their constituents and nobody else. And I think that's what people really like to see. And it's not just about ideology all the time. Like, Ro Khanna is from a very, he's from Silicon Valley, he represents Silicon Valley, and he's also very progressive. And, like, they still like him. They will elect him every single time because he delivers for them in the ways that matter to them. And that means getting to know your constituents well. It means being present and listening more. And that's something the rest of the country needs to, like, look at and take notes from. I think people like Schumer need to do the same thing as well. Because those are the people that are really delivering, that have these high approval rates, that are able to meet people where they're at. And we need so much more of that in 2026 and 2028. And that starts with ditching consultants, right? We don't need consultants. We're not working for consultants. We're working for the people. And so we should be learning from them, asking them and consulting them, not people that we're paying.
Yeah. And I think, like, 100% right on everybody's point here. And, you know, I'll just take it, just one more quick thing to say before we let this one go. Adam does a really good job of this. And, like, you know, I know that firsthand, but other politicians, AOCs, all the ones that we mentioned, if you just show that you're listening to your voters, right? If you just show that you're listening to them, you acknowledge, you understand, and explain why you're doing what you're doing, they can forgive you not necessarily doing things that they agree with, right? Where the distrust or the mistrust comes is from when they feel like you're not listening at all and you're working for somebody else. If you give me a problem that you're having in the community and I'm almost certain that you have a way that you think that this should be solved. If mine differentiates from that, but I acknowledge that, yes, you have that problem, I agree that it's a problem, but this is the way that I think we should go about it, they're going to trust you and they're going to understand that even if I disagree with your approach, I know that you're working for me, or you're working for what I want to be, you know, want to happen, or what I want done. And we need more of that. We need more of that listening, like Sohali said. We need more of the people out there saying, okay, I acknowledge what you're saying, and while I may not agree, or you may not agree with the way that I want to approach it, I am trying to help you. We need way, way, way more of that.
That's exactly right. And then I just want to ask a real fun question for y'all to end with, because I just think about crazy shit all the time. Y'all think that if a dog wore pants, it would wear them on 4 legs or 2 legs? Ian saying 2? You got
Yeah,
just
I think
like
two
the
as
back
well. I think
legs or
the
the front
trousers.
legs?
Back
What's
legs,
that?
of course.
Back legs.
See, to me, like, it makes sense that it would wear them up to its waist all the way across, and it would cover all 4
How would it
legs.
stay?
A belt?
I
mean,
I don't know what else could hold that up.
All right, I got 3 dogs here, and it's not working on any of them.
I don't know. I think a belt could work.
A
Maybe
chest belt?
Yeah, a little chest belt. Little chest belt action.
No, I'm going 2 legs, back legs, pants. That's it.
You said the same thing, Sanjay?
Yeah, I think the same thing. I think
He's like, this is-
I
that
haven't seen
seems
Sohali have an opinion on this.
fits more.
I feel like it's gotta be 4. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Love it. All right, y'all. Well, that was a great special edition. We can't thank y'all enough for coming on. Tell people where they can find you at, Sunjay and Sohali.
Yeah, of course. So, you can follow, myself on Twitter. I post there quite a bit at SunjayM_000. But I think more importantly, you should follow College Dems on all socials. It's just College Dems, no spaces, no caps, on Instagram, Twitter, and X, I guess now, and TikTok. As well as, don't ever hesitate to reach out. If you go to our website, you can find the contact for myself, Sohali, and the rest of our executive board. You know, we're here to help you, and kind of, we had this whole conversation about listening. So we're always here to listen to you and want to hear what your concerns are.
Good stuff.
Follow College Dems. We're always trying to make some noise out there, and so help us and join our fight. And then you can follow me at Sohali V everywhere.
Right. Well, thank y'all again for tuning in today. If you like this or you hated it, I don't care. Like either way, just please share it and go find us on all Twitters. You can follow us at Jackass Politics. Like us, subscribe us, share us, please. And thank y'all again for everyone. See y'all.
Later.